He didn't flinch when he said it, didn't look away, didn't even pause. Take it or leave it, Adrienne. Just like that. 5 words across the boardroom table. One offer carved in corporate indifference. I closed my laptop slowly. Not slammed, not snapped. Click, soft and final. I looked at the man sitting across from me, Lucas Pryor, the new CEO of Archelon Logistics, a finance guy in a tech company, recently installed by the board to reshape the future. And by reshape, they meant cut costs, erase legacy rebrand experience as inefficiency. 52, and still in the same chair he'd joked once, not realizing I'd built the table. Now he sat there like a man playing poker with someone who taught him the game. I assume you're aware of your current compensation package, he continued, gesturing to a printout he hadn't bothered to turn my way. And you'll see here that the revised offer reflects the new structure. Streamlined, lean, agile. Words you've probably seen floating around. I nodded, once, no expression. He leaned back confident I'd resist that he'd get to say what came next. Maybe this isn't the right place for you anymore, but I didn't resist. I smiled. You're right, I said. It's not. I stood up, closed the manila folder I hadn't opened, slid it back across the table. Lucas blinked. The kind of blink people do when they expect a negotiation and instead get a decision. No slam, no storm out. I walked to the door, hand on the handle, paused. One thing I said looking back over my shoulder. If you're planning to reroute the Q4 distribution schedule without reconciling it through the cobalt layer, you're going to hit a 6-state delay window in 12 days. But I'm sure your new lean team has it covered. He frowned, trying to place the word cobalt. He couldn't. He didn't know the systems that kept his entire delivery network upright. Because those systems, I'd built them. And Lucas Pryor had just removed the only person who knew where the blind spots lived. I left the room, quiet shoes on polished concrete. No one stopped me. Not then. But what they didn't know, I didn't walk out empty-handed. I walked out with a map, not a revenge plan. A diagnostic of failure already in motion. When I first joined Archelon, it wasn't even called Archelon yet. Just a patchwork freight company with an outdated fleet and a bleeding ledger. I was 35 then, hired on as a strategy consultant during a merger no one thought would survive the quarter. They handed me a folding chair and a stack of invoices, told me to find the inefficiencies. By the end of that year, I'd consolidated 5 regions, rewrote their routing logic, and saved them enough to stay solvent. By the end of the second, I was Chief Strategy Officer. Not by title, but by necessity. I didn't ask for promotions. I just kept solving fires faster than they could name them. So no, this wasn't my first war room. But it might be the first time I left one on purpose. Lucas Pryor had been at Archelon exactly 91 days when he sat across from me with his little take it or leave it speech. In those 91 days, he'd cut 3 senior directors, replaced them with consultants from his old hedge fund, and installed a SaaS workflow overlay that cost $900K and broke every legacy dashboard we used. He renamed our internal teams with buzzwords like Velocity Pod and SyncOps. He moved fast, he moved loudly, but he never once asked how our predictive model adjusted when fuel prices spiked in the Midwest. Because he didn't know we had one. That's the thing about infrastructure. If it's done right, it disappears. And for 17 years, I had disappeared on purpose. I never posted about Archelon on LinkedIn. I never gave interviews. I never campaigned for awards. But I built things, quiet things. The cobalt layer I referenced on my way out. That wasn't just tech jargon. It was a proprietary predictive overlay I'd spent 5 years refining. It stitched together data from real-time route feeds, weather volatility, fuel index shifts, and warehouse latency into a single living grid. It wasn't sexy. It didn't have a dashboard. But it worked. Our on-time delivery rate went from 72% to 91% the year I activated it. It helped us win the federal logistics contract in 2019. Lucas didn't even know it existed. Why? Because it was never presented in a boardroom. It lived under the systems, behind the scenes, in the comments of formulas no one else dared touch. I didn't name it Cobalt because it sounded techy. I named it that because, like the element, it was stable, resistant, strong. And now the man trying to modernize the company had unknowingly begun dismantling the very thing keeping it afloat. Let him. Let him think I was just another legacy exec priced out of relevance. Let him forget how many firewalls I had quietly patched. Because here's what Lucas Pryor never understood. The people who keep things running aren't the loudest in the room. They're the ones who know where the wires cross. And now that I was no longer obligated to protect those wires, I was free to let gravity do the rest. It started with the calendar. My weekly syncs with the ops team disappeared. No cancellation. No transfer. Just gone. I checked with Kara, my longtime assistant. I think they're restructuring senior strategy touchpoints, she said, eyes not quite meeting mine. Restructuring. The corporate word for we've already decided we're just waiting for you to leave quietly. Then came the desk. I returned from a scheduled client call to find my office door slightly ajar. Inside sat a man I didn't recognize, mid-30s, high-fade laptop open, already rearranging furniture. He didn't look up until I stepped inside. Oh, sorry, I was told this space was reassigned. You must be, Adrienne, right? He didn't even stand. I didn't argue, just nodded once, then turned and walked to the far end of the floor, past the glass conference rooms, past the welcome mural I helped design during the 2017 rebrand, and found an empty cubicle near the server maintenance closet. No nameplate, no chair. I rolled one over myself. The next morning, my badge access failed at the west stairwell. Then it stopped working for the executive lounge. Then the strategy sandbox platform. Then my admin login to the Cobalt console. No announcement, no email, just permissions turned to silence. I knew what this was. This wasn't firing. It was erasure, the slow, intentional kind. Make someone invisible long enough, and eventually they stop showing up altogether. Lucas didn't need a confrontation. He just needed a controlled disappearance. I let it happen. I didn't protest. I didn't call legal. I didn't even schedule a meeting with HR because I knew where HR's loyalties lived. Instead, I logged into my personal laptop and watched. Watched as the new hires struggled with regional tiered routing policies. Watched the lead analyst try to run models without realizing they were still referencing 2022 fuel tax tables. Watched Lucas begin repitching a 3-year-old campaign to an enterprise client like it was original strategy. And then there was Marcus, my replacement. He'd been at the company 6 weeks. Touted as a wunderkind from a shipping tech startup that had folded during Series B. He spoke in frictionless lingo, execution alignment network, elasticity. But when I asked him where he planned to reallocate our line haul redundancies after cutting the Illinois corridor, he blinked like I'd spoken Latin. That's still under evaluation, he mumbled. We're looking into third-party modeling software. Sure you are. Meanwhile, I sat quietly in my makeshift cubicle headset on pretending to sort through past campaign data. But what I was really doing was tracing what they were breaking. Every system they replaced without review. Every dependency they cut loose without understanding its root. They didn't know that Cobalt wasn't just software. It was interdependent logic running through naming conventions, timestamp behavior permission hierarchies. The more they deleted, the more fragile the system became. Like pulling out bricks from a load-bearing wall. I documented everything, logged changes, screenshotted errors, built a private archive of decision trees they were unraveling in real time. Not for revenge, not yet, for leverage. Because if they wanted to pretend I was never here, they needed to feel what happened when I truly wasn't. Then came the town hall. Lucas stood on stage, sleeves rolled, all charm and promise. We're entering a new chapter, he said. A leaner, smarter Archelon. Some roles, unfortunately, no longer align with that vision. He never said my name. He didn't have to. Everyone knew. Some turned to look. Others didn't dare. I kept my face neutral, hands still, shoulders square. When the clapping started, it was polite. Not one person applauded louder than they needed to. And that silence, that restraint, that told me everything. They weren't celebrating the change. They were waiting to see if I would vanish. But I didn't vanish. Not really. Because while they were busy cutting people, I was remembering the code strings no one else could trace. The vendor contracts no one had fully read. The compliance overlap between two systems that hadn't been reconciled since the 2020 audit. And most of all, I remembered the one thing Lucas Pryor never bothered to check, who held the license to the operational architecture beneath it all. There's a saying in systems design, you don't need to break the machine. You just need to move one cog. That's what I started doing quietly, precisely one cog at a time. I began arriving 15 minutes earlier than usual. Not enough to raise alarms, just enough to sit undisturbed at my corner cubicle near the maintenance closet, where no one bothered to look. I wasn't accessing the current network. I was logging into a shadow environment I'd built years ago, Cobalt Echo, the internal testbed, where we'd first modeled alternate delivery scenarios during the West Coast wildfires of 2018. It was never decommissioned. No one knew it still existed, except me, and it still ran, clean, undetected. Invisible to most admin logs unless you knew exactly what string to search for, which Lucas didn't. I pulled archived route simulations. I mirrored decision tree adjustments made over the last 3 quarters. I tracked every override Marcus and his team executed and compared them to known fail points we'd red flagged back when the system was young and fragile. And then I began syncing that data to an encrypted personal archive, air-gapped, disguised as a project legacy folder titled HR Guide 2015 PDF. Not illegal, not theft, just retention of what was mine. Meanwhile, Lucas and his agile advisors began prepping for what they called Next Leap Week, an internal showcase of the company's future new strategy decks, bold roadmaps, fancy product names like Quick Access and Loop Fleet. I watched as they recycled phrasing from old proposals I'd shelved for being too unstable. I recognized entire segments of code Marcus was calling new API endpoints, even though I'd seen them first in a sandbox build from 2019. They hadn't even changed the variable names. Innovation, they called it. But all I saw was sloppy inheritance. One night, well past 7 p.m., I was finalizing a Delta log in Echo when I heard footsteps. Not loud heels, precise, rhythmic, Kara. She paused at the edge of the cubicle. "You're still here?" "Almost done," I said, gesturing to a completely blank Excel screen. She nodded, then hesitated. You don't have to stay. They don't deserve it." I closed the fake spreadsheet and met her eyes. "I'm not staying for them." She didn't ask for more, just placed a sealed manila envelope on the desk. "Lucas asked me to prep this for Monday's press kit. It includes some system screenshots. Some of them still reference Cobalt." My chest tightened, but I stayed calm. "Did he clear that with compliance?" She shook her head. "No. He said, and I quote, 'That thing's legacy fluff. No one checks those dependencies anymore.'" I smiled, small, quiet, deadly. "Thanks for the heads up." That night, I went home and activated the last layer. Not destruction, not corruption, withdrawal. I drafted a legal memo, clean, clinical, precise, effective. Immediately, I formally revoke passive contribution and consultative association with the system, herein referred to as Cobalt Predictive Layer, and all extensions thereof, including, but not limited to, Echo Tether Sim and Logistic Mapper 2. Access, maintenance, and continuation beyond this point occur without my legal authorization or protection. Adrienne Shaw, I scheduled it. Timed for 9:01 a.m. Monday. The exact moment Lucas would present the future he thought he controlled. I wasn't sabotaging, I was simply stepping back. And when you build a system with your bare hands, sometimes the most powerful move isn't to break it. It's to stop holding it up. Monday morning. 9:01 a.m. Lucas stepped onto the stage of Archelon's newly renovated atrium. It was all LED lighting, exposed beams, and rented optimism. They'd even rolled in a cold brew cart as if caffeine could drown tension. They called it Next Leap Week. I stood in the back. No name badge, no seat. Just another face near the catering trays. Most didn't notice. A few did and quickly looked away. Lucas grinned like a man selling futures he didn't have to deliver. "Archelon is evolving," he said. Voice amplified, arms outstretched. "We've shed the past, reimagined the present, and now we look to scale what's next." Screens behind him flashed buzzwords in motion. Efficient, modular, scalable. And then came the demo. He queued up the deck I'd seen floating around for weeks. Screenshots from Cobalt ripped straight from my legacy system, rebranded as Loop Fleet AI. They even changed the color scheme as if paint could mask provenance. A few people clapped. Some looked confused. One VP leaned toward another and whispered, "Isn't that Adrienne's Lucas cut in, bright and dismissive?" We've modernized what came before, built our own engine, ground-up redesign. Then he paused for effect, looked straight at me across the room. Sometimes stepping aside is the best thing a legacy leader can do. There it was, the shot. Some laughed, some didn't. But it didn't matter. The narrative was set. Adrienne Shaw, outdated, outpaced, irrelevant, gone. I didn't move, didn't blink. I just checked my phone. 9:04 a.m. An email confirmation lit up my lock screen. Legal revocation protocol delivered successfully. Confirmed read receipt. Ops IT compliance. Perfect. I slipped out the side door without a word. Let them believe they'd won. Let them laugh. Because I wasn't there for applause. I was there to watch the clock. By noon, things started slipping. A route model displayed a 404 error mid-demo. A logistics report showed Q3 fuel indexing from 2019. Someone noticed delivery forecasts had reverted to baselines not used since the pandemic. By 2:00 p.m., a junior project manager flagged a data inconsistency and tried to rerun the algorithm. It failed, completely. Cobalt had quietly detached itself. Without authorization, there was no right to its dependencies. And without me, there was no understanding of how to reconnect the web they'd just severed. The dominoes had started falling. And Lucas Pryor. He still thought I'd left, but the truth was I hadn't walked away. I'd walked ahead. It started with a late shipment report, just a minor delay, or so they thought. The Northeast Corridor flagged a discrepancy, something about route optimization not syncing with current warehouse capacities. Lucas blamed a manual entry error. The new analyst offered to just rebuild the model from scratch. By noon, 5 more corridors reported cascading delays. Overnight shipments rerouted to depots that didn't exist anymore. A cold chain fleet stranded in Toledo waiting for load manifests that had been archived months ago. The Cobalt layer was gone. The predictive web that held real-time variables, traffic, weather, staffing, maintenance, downtimes had dissolved. Or rather, it had politely excused itself. Because the truth was, Cobalt hadn't failed. It had opted out. I sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from headquarters, watching it unfold in silence. No fanfare, no breaking news. Just Slack messages leaking confusion. Who has the admin key to Loop Fleet's sync logic? Guys, why are the analytics pulling from pre-merged databases? Can someone call Adrienne? But I had no obligation to respond. They'd taken my name off the system. They'd scrubbed it from internal documentation, replaced authorship tags with generic admin IDs, removed me from the onboarding manual. Even the tech wiki no longer credited Cobalt's origin. It was poetic, really. They wanted my fingerprints off everything. Now they had exactly that. Then came the clients. The California Port Authority, our biggest logistics partner, contacted the regional director directly. Apparently, their live tracking portal had stopped updating. The predictive estimate was stuck on Sunday night's baseline. The Midwest Food Alliance flagged a missed shipment chain, asking why delivery was routed through a frozen corridor during a known flood watch. No one had an answer. Within 48 hours, 6 accounts placed service reviews on hold. 2 escalated to legal. 1 sent a direct message to Lucas. We'd like to speak with Adrienne. Only, I wasn't there. Back inside Archelon's offices, panic didn't come loudly. It arrived in fragments, locked dashboards, login timeouts, silent dashboards blinking red. People began hovering around each other's desks, hushed, confused, afraid to say what they all suspected. The future Archelon had built was already behind. And Lucas, he kept talking about next leap week, like it hadn't shattered beneath him. He doubled down in all-hands emails. We're navigating some transitional friction. Stay the course. We've modernized from legacy limitations. But no one believed that anymore. Because it wasn't just about broken routes or delayed freight. It was about trust, that silent contract between a system and its operator. And now the operator was gone. Not out of spite. Out of precision. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just watched the ripple expand. They thought letting me go was about salary, about structure. But what they never understood, you can't cut the power line and expect the lights to stay on. 3 weeks later, I walked into a different boardroom. Not Archelon's. This one had better lighting, sunlit glass walls, real plants, quiet hum of people who knew exactly what they were doing. This was Sarah Logistics, Archelon's primary competitor in mid-range freight, and the company I had once turned down twice out of loyalty. Now I stood at the head of their strategy table, holding a simple leather folio. No badge, no entourage, just a name and a reputation that suddenly mattered again. "We're honored to have you lead the integration," said the COO, "especially given the circumstances. Circumstances. That's what they were calling it. The truth, Archelon was hemorrhaging clients. Half of the predictive models had collapsed. They'd lost 4 key accounts in 2 weeks. The press hadn't picked up the story yet, but the industry had. And Sarah had moved fast, not to gloat, to absorb. One of those accounts, Midwest Food Alliance, had requested a new strategy session. Sarah offered to host it. I offered to lead it. They accepted within an hour, which is how I found myself standing in a conference room, now filled with familiar faces, logistics partners, compliance reps, 2 VPs I hadn't seen since my final week at Archelon. And then 5 minutes before the meeting began, he walked in. Lucas? He froze when he saw me, just for a beat. Then recovered, straightening his cuffs, smoothing his tie like the fabric might restore his authority. He wasn't here to lead. He was here to explain. The Midwest Alliance had invited him at the last minute not to present but to listen. He took the seat farthest from mine, didn't speak. I began the session calmly. No fanfare, no drama, just strategy. "Let's begin with a clean breakdown of the predictive model Sarah will be implementing for your Tier 1 food corridors," I said, clicking to a slide. This framework was stress-tested under volatile pricing and natural disaster simulations proven stable through 18 months of irregular demand. There was a moment of silence as the screen filled with what was unmistakably my work. Evolved, improved, but undeniably mine. Because I hadn't brought Cobalt with me, I'd brought what came after it. "You've rebuilt it," said one client softly. "No," I corrected, smiling. "I rerouted it. Now it's growing where it's valued." Lucas didn't say a word. He just stared at the screen, at me, at everything he'd discarded now living without him. When the meeting ended, most people lingered to shake my hand. One rep from the Alliance simply nodded and said, "We're ready to move forward with you." Lucas waited until the room cleared. "You knew this would happen," he said. I met his gaze. "No, I just knew what you were willing to lose without asking what it was worth." He tried to answer, thought better of it, left instead. He didn't look back. But I did, just once. Not to gloat, not to revel, but to mark the moment. The first time I walked into a room they thought I no longer belonged in, and realized I didn't need permission to lead it. A month later, I received an invitation, not from Archelon, from the National Supply Chain Forum, an annual gathering of the most influential minds in logistics technology and systems ethics. They wanted me to speak on sustainable infrastructure in times of disruption. I almost declined. I hadn't sought a platform. I wasn't building a personal brand. But then I thought about every engineer, every strategist, every overlooked operator who kept systems running quietly until someone like Lucas decided they were replaceable. So I accepted. The venue was a vaulted glass hall in Chicago. Hundreds of executives, analysts, and board members filled the auditorium. The front row held 2 Archelon directors. I recognized their shoes before their faces. My turn came without a dramatic introduction, just my name on a slide. I walked on stage, no script, no slideshow, just a clicker in my palm and my voice. When we talk about disruption, we often glorify the loudest voice, the boldest break. But real disruption doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it walks out quietly and takes the logic with it. There were no metaphors, no outrage, just truth. I talked about systems that collapse when a single person leaves, not because they were irreplaceable, but because no one ever bothered to understand what they'd quietly built. I didn't burn the system, I said. I just stopped holding it up. And when I ended, the applause wasn't thunderous. It was steady, purposeful. No one stood, but many leaned forward. Listening. Really listening. And that's when I realized I hadn't just walked back in. I had rewritten the blueprint for how we're allowed to return. Outside in the cold afternoon air, someone stopped me. "You could have taken that severance and disappeared," they said. I smiled. I didn't want the exit package. "Then what did you want?" I turned toward the skyline. Calm. "I didn't take the offer," I said. I took the floor. And this time, no one dared take it back.